the data from here is going to be substituted in, so it will look now like this. What we can then do, so the data's been substituted in through these variables, what we can then do is we run this query and it returns us either 0 rows or 1 row depending on if the username and the password match. So hopefully you understand that at this point. Now what happens if the user was to enter some values that actually modify our SQL query, which is here? So for example, let's say the username was single quotation mark equals single quotation mark or 2 quotation marks equals quotation mark. Let's just say the user entered that as the username, and they did the same for the password. So because they're free to enter anything in the form, we've picked up these variables using this, and now we're transferring these variables into here. So now username, let's just copy and paste over, that to there, and copy and paste that over to there. Now let's get rid of this because that just showed us the example. So the username is now equal to this value here, and the password is also equal to this value in blue. So let's just look at the highlighted value in blue. What this has actually done, if I take the blue away, you can see it's modified our SQL statement. So obviously our users of our website can't see what we're processing inside of PHP, but what they can do is fiddle around with the website until they can make a very good guess or an exact guess at how our SQL statement is structured. Now what this query reads is select ID from users where username equals nothing or nothing equals nothing, and password equals nothing or nothing equals nothing. Now nothing equals nothing, so that's true, and nothing equals nothing, so that's true. Therefore what we're doing is we're returning a row or a couple of rows. So let's copy and paste this into our database to see what results we get. Let's click go. Okay, so we've been returned with our 2 rows in our database, or our 2 records rather. So what we've actually done is, just by user input and me demonstrating user input, we're going to actually create the application later. What we've done is we've returned 2 rows now. So we've entered the password as this let's just go back to it. We've entered the password as this here, or the username as this here, and the password as this here, and we've now automatically gained access to this whatever registration system, however we're creating it. So this isn't always the case, it depends on how it's programmed. This is why we're going to go through an example program. So that's just basically a bit about PHP or SQL injection in general, but with PHP obviously it's the same vulnerability. So now we know what SQL injection is, and we've seen an example of it. You know now that a statement can be modified, and a statement can be modified to, let's say, delete records. We're not going to go into anything too complex. This is just a representation of it, but we can do absolutely anything we want to our database, more or less. So I'm going to talk now just about the first way to protect against SQL injection. This doesn't actually prevent the user input. We're not doing anything in PHP. But if we go back to our home and we go to privileges and we edit privileges for our user, let's say root at localhost. This is what I'm using at the moment. Now you can see here that we've got ticks for absolutely everything. Now let's say we were creating a website and we were logging in, we were connecting to our server, and we were also connecting to our database and reading values from a database. Let's just say we were just reading values from a database. We're not creating anything, so we might want to untick that. We might not be altering anything, so we might untick that. So you can uncheck things that you might not want to do. So we might select, but we might not insert, and we might not update or delete, and we can get rid of all of these. So by getting rid of all of these, we've already limited our privileges for this specific user. Therefore, if someone was to come in and try to inject or change your statement server side to, say, delete your entire database, then they might not be able to do it because you may have unselected the privileges. So at the moment, because I'm working on a local computer, my privileges are set to everything, just in case, you know, depending on what I need to do. So that's one way that you can protect against it. So only select the privileges that you absolutely need on the website. So if you, I mean, it's very rare that inside a web application you'd want to say drop your entire database. So you can remove this, or drop tables. You might need to drop tables. But you can untick specific ones. So that's something to think about while we carry on with our actual PHP code. So let's go back to our database so we can monitor what we're doing here, and click back on users. Okay, so we're going to start by opening our text editor. We're going to connect to our MySQL server and then connect to our database. So I'm not going to be doing this properly because in this video I'm just demonstrating SQL injection. So I'm just going to use a standard MySQL connect function. It takes 3 parameters. If you haven't already looked at this, I do have another video on it, so go back and again have a look at this. My username is root and my password is just blank, and I'm going to say MySQL select DB, and this is a_database. So let's just echo out a confirmation message here, just to check that we're connecting successfully. So let's refresh there. No, to do that. Okay, so we've got an OK message there, so we've successfully connected to the database. Let's start creating our form. So we need to take a username and a password value, and we're doing this. I'm going to put both fields equal to text values so we can see what we're typing in our password field. So I'm going to say form action, and I need to set a property form method as well. And the form action is going to be index.php. We're going to come back to that, and the method is going to be post. Okay, so we want username, and we want to take an input, and the type is text. The name is username, and that's it. So now what we can do is say password. We'll bring this down a line, even though we're not breaking down the line, we'll just bring it down for neatness. We'll say input type is text. Name equals password, so this is the user's password, and then again we'll just line down and we'll say add a submit button here. It's a very basic HTML form that we're creating. Let's just preview it in our browser, and yeah, we've got username and password, so we can type something here and we can type something here. Okay, so we can see the password. You'd usually set it to the type of password, so you can't actually see the password, but for now we're gonna set it to text so we see what we're doing. So when the form resubmits, we need to first of all check if the posted username and posted password are set. So we use the isSet language construct. So we say isSet post username, and so we use our and operator, and we say isSet $_post password. So if these are both set, we can now assign them to their own variables. So username is going to equal $_post username, and password is going to equal $_post password. So let's just echo these out so we can see that this is giving us back our input. So I'm going to type A in here and B in here. So what we should get back is just A, B next to each other. Okay, yeah, so our variables are successfully being picked up using the post username and the post password. So we can now get rid of that echo. It's always good to test your program as you go along. Now I'm going to say if not empty username and not empty password, echo OK. So now let's test this and submit nothing. Okay, nothing happens. Now let's test submit A and B. Click submit OK. So we are checking, just doing some basic form validation. The username and password must exist. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to structure our query. So our query is going to equal, and like I said, if you've already seen this, you'll know exactly what we're doing. The query is going to equal select ID from users, much like I demonstrated just about 5 minutes ago. So select ID from users, where username equals something here, and password equals something here. So let's just put them in apostrophes. So where username equals something and password equals something, this is obvious. It's where username equals username and password equals password. So now we can create a new variable called query run, and we can run this query. So MySQL query, and actually process that query through MySQL. Now this is the dangerous line, because what we've done here is we've processed this query, and so far we've given absolutely no protection whatsoever to protect against SQL injection. And I'll show you in a minute. We're going to look at something inside the php.ini file, so the PHP configuration file, which doesn't automatically escape characters such as a single quotation mark. So usually when you submit data with a single quotation mark, you can automatically put a / in front of it as a security measure. But at the moment I've got it disabled in my php.ini file, so that's the first way we're going to look at protecting against SQL injection. So let's first of all just comment out these, and let's go ahead and echo out the username, and we'll break down a line and we will echo out the password as well, and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. Now remember earlier we talked about quotation marks inside our queries, and quotation marks are deadly as far as query goes, because what people can do, like we looked at earlier, is end a specific statement, if you like, and create something else. So we can add or keywords in, and we can end different lines, or end different, like where equals, and we can end here and then start something else and then end here again, just like I demonstrated earlier. So if we type in, say, Alex and pass 123, we've got Alex and pass 123. Now let's type in this value that we typed in earlier. So we've got we've got a single quotation mark, a space, or, and two single quotation marks equals single quotation mark. Let's go ahead and press, oh no, we'll put it in here as well. So there we go. Let's press enter. You can see that these values have been transferred through, literally. So nothing's changed. We've transferred the exact data that we've typed into the form. Now, this is the reason that our SQL can be modified. So with as it stands at the moment, if we had these uncommented, we could run a query of our choice. So let's go ahead and uncomment this. Now we've processed our query. If something was in here now to delete something or modify something, then this is deadly. However, in our user login system, we are creating an if statement to check how many rows have been returned, because if the username and password don't equal the same thing in the same record, then we can't log the user in, because their credentials obviously don't match, and we will have an invalid username and password combination. So let's go ahead and create this if statement. Let's go MySQL num row. So we're calling this function, which is going to count the amount of rows returned by this query here. So we can type in query run there. So if the MySQL num rows returned from the query are greater than or equal to 1, this means that the credentials match both the username and password. So we can echo login success. Usually we wouldn't do this. At this point in here, we would process some kind of session to equal the ID from the database, but for now we're just using this as an example. So otherwise, invalid username password combination. Okay, yeah. So let's go ahead and try this with the values that we submit. So I'm going to keep this open, and I'm going to break down again. Okay, so let's go back and go straight onto our index.php file. Let's type in Alex and a wrong password, so pass456. Now we've got Alex as the username, pass456 as the password, and we've returned the message invalid username and password combination, because nowhere in our table do we have Alex and pass456 as the username and password. So now what we can do is we'll go and submit some correct data. So Alex and pass123, these match here. So we've got Alex as the username and password, 123 as the password. Click submit, and it says login success because we've successfully submitted the username and password that match inside of our table. So now let's go ahead and use this example that we used earlier by writing a single quotation mark or double quotation mark equals double quotation mark. And what this is going to do is it's going to structure our query as we discussed earlier, and it's just going to put into here, and the password as well, that or that equals that. So that's going to go into our query, and we're going to return more than one row. Therefore the user is automatically logged in. So let's go ahead and click submit. Okay, so you can see that the username is single quotation mark or single quotation mark equals single quotation mark, and the password is also that as well. And now you can see, interestingly, we've got a login success here. So this is a real problem when it comes to our user login system, if you like, because what we've done is now anyone can type these values in, and unfortunately they can log in as a user when they maybe don't have access. So how can we protect against this? Well, I'm going to show you 3 different ways now that we can protect against this specific error. For your own queries you might need to slightly modify this, but now I'm just going to talk about this so we can get the general idea of how we can start to protect. Now the first problem we look at is the single quotation marks. The single quotation marks need to be escaped in order for them not to work. So for example, if we were submitting, if we were submitting the data like this and escaping that, and that, so let's copy and paste that into here, and we click submit, you see that we get an invalid username password combination. So we need some way to escape the different characters. Now there's something in PHP and something in the php.ini file which I've just opened here. If you don't know how to open this or don't know how to edit things from it, you can find a tutorial on that as well. What we have here is we have magic quotes GPC, and you can see the comment just above it is magic quotes for incoming get, post or cookie data. And what this is going to do is it's going to escape, like I've just written here, these automatically when you submit data. So it's not foolproof because we might not be submitting through a post or a get or even cookie. So let's go ahead and turn this on. And in a moment we're going to turn it off, and I'm going to show you how you can also include this if it's automatically, say, off on your server. So let's go ahead and restart Apache from our XAMPP control panel. So remember, every time you make a change in your php.ini file you must restart Apache. Okay, so let's come back to our page and wait for localhost. Right, okay, so our server has been restarted and we've turned magic quotes on. So now let's go ahead and do exactly the same thing and click submit. Now you can see that without doing anything we've automatically now escaped. Well, we did do something, we changed the value in php.ini, but what we didn't do is change any of our code, and this has automatically given us some sort of protection against SQL injection. So now if magic quotes is not on, how can we protect against this? Let's turn magic quotes off and save our php.ini file and come into our XAMPP control panel and restart Apache once more. Okay, so let's now refresh and cause this SQL injection. Okay, so we've caused the SQL injection once again. Now what we need to do is think of another way that we can protect against SQL injection. So if magic quotes by default is on, I also recommend you take this next step in order to secure the variables that you pass into your query string or into your query itself. So what we can do is we can use a function called MySQL real escape string. Now what this does is it acts very much like the magic quotes, and it escapes specific characters. I'm not sure what characters in particular it does escape, but it does escape single quotation marks and I think apostrophes as well. So let's go ahead and enclose our username and password variables in this function. So to do this, we need to end our output and concatenate on our variable. So you should be comfortable with doing this. We're just ending the output, concatenating on the variable, concatenating the end of the output on there. So now what we can do is we have room to say MySQL real escape string, and we can enclose the username variable in that, and MySQL real escape string, and we can enclose this password variable in that as well. So now, although we have magic quotes turned off, and last time we refreshed the page we have this login success because of the SQL injection, now let's refresh again and click continue, and you can see it says invalid username password combination. So we haven't actually escaped the form data that's been sent, but what we have done is inside of our query we've escaped this data. So let's go ahead and echo out the query so we can see what's going on here. Okay, so let's refresh and continue. So what we've got is we've got select ID from users where username equals, and now you can see that this function has escaped these characters here. So even though it's not escaped the post data, it's escaped it inside of our query. So it's highly recommended probably that you have magic quotes GPC on, and you also use this MySQL real escape string. Now there's another problem with our code. Let's just unescape these, and we'll return to our original state of this. Okay, so let's go ahead and not echo this query out, and we'll refresh. Okay, so we're back to the state that we have SQL injection possible. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make a small modification to how we check the number of rows in our database. So now at the moment we've got if MySQL numRows query run are greater than or equal to 1, then we say login success. Now we can make a small change here because we're saying greater than or equal to 1. Remember earlier when we looked inside and we performed an SQL query in here, we performed the query, this same query. Let's copy and paste that so we can put it into here. So we're performing this query, but what we're doing now is we are saying equal to this, or this equals this, and we're doing exactly the same for password. We're saying this or this equals this. Okay, so let's copy and paste that so we can use it later. Let's go. So what you can see here is we've returned 2 rows because this query will actually, the way we've structured it, we've returned 2 rows. So now what's going to happen is inside of this we're checking for greater than or equal to 1 row returned. So what happens if we just check for 1 row being returned? Then in this case of this query, this is why you can't apply this rule to every query, because you may be doing different checks inside your program. So with specific regard for my program, just changing this operator to is equal to, we have to return only 1 row for login to succeed, because the nature of our database is that we're only ever going to return 1 row if the username and password match, because we're never going to have the same username in our database because of the way we program our user systems. You never find that on websites you have the same username twice, so therefore this will never ever return more than 1 row if done properly. So now just by changing this to equals 1, we can see that by refreshing, because we've returned 2 rows, it doesn't equal to 1, therefore it's an invalid username and password combination. However, when we supply it with the correct data, we return 1 row and we have a login success. So combining these 3, I mean this one's loosely related to my design only. So by using MySQL real escape string when passing variables through to a query that's being executed within PHP, so MySQL real escape string on that one as well. By doing that, by making sure you make the relevant checks inside once you've made your query, and also changing this magic quotes GPC to on rather than off, by using a combination of, or the majority of these methods, and there are other methods, so you can go away and research it, but hopefully you've taken away from this that doing all these three things can somewhat protect you against SQL injection. Hello, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, back with another video for the New Boston. Now, in this short tutorial series about GD inside PHP, we're going to be talking about what GD is, and we're going to be doing a variety of things with GD, and it's called the GD library. It doesn't actually come with PHP by default, so it's a library that you have to either install yourself, or because we're using the XAMPP package, as shown in my previous tutorials how to install it in Windows, GD will already come pre-installed with this. And what we do is we use PHP directly, and using this GD library, what we can actually do is we can generate and we can also modify graphics. So let's take an example and just speak about an example of how you might find GD useful. Now, you may have seen websites that allow you to upload images or groups of images, so multiple images, and you may find that these are watermarked. I know eBay, when you upload an image, it creates a little watermark in the bottom right hand corner, which sort of, you know, gives the image some kind of relation to the website. And this doesn't have to be a translucent watermarked image. It can in fact be some text, so you can generate text with GD. You can also watermark another image over an image. So there's a variety of things that you can do with the GD library. Now, another example you may have seen registration forms that ask you to enter some distorted characters or blurred out or stretched characters, and you'll obviously know this is for security purposes. Now, why do we do this? We use what's called a captcha form, or a captcha image, if you like, to allow only human-based registrations or submission of data through a form. So, for example, if you have a form and you want the data to be submitted, but not submitted in mass, we use something called a captcha image, or a security image, really, that is only human readable, or most of the time, sort of 90+% of the time, is human readable. So the distorted text has to be read and then input into another box by a user for the form to, you know, or for the user of the website or for the owner of the website to be satisfied that only humans can register with this form. Then obviously if the incorrect image is entered, or the text from the image is entered, then it's asked to be done again. So this prevents automatic submission of data through forms. Now, another way to use GHD, which is a less commonly used method but a really interesting, good way to use the GD library. And by the way, captcha forms, or security images if you like, are not always used with GD, so there's a variety of ways you can do this, but in my future tutorials that you may watch, you'll see that we deal with creating our own captcha image using GD. So we're going to be using GD to create our own and not allow a form to be submitted unless this image is correct. So now, another use, like I said, is less commonly used but a really great way to go about things is, let's say I registered on a website and I was to output my email address. So this might be anything at anything.com. Now, my email address, let's say we output on my profile page. Now, if my email address is in text form, so it's in text form that can be picked up by, say, a robot, for example, that's been programmed to go through websites and pick up email addresses. So you'll see some people choose to write their email address like this, like this, or they might do something like dot there and then at there in brackets as well. Vice versa, using different symbols. This is just simply for security purposes that they do this. However, a great way to store an email address when displaying it in a profile page, to enhance the security of this so email addresses can't be collected in mass, this gives sort of peace of mind to your users if you store it in an image form. So what we can do is we can store this exactly as text, so it can be text, but we store it as an image so it can't be easily picked up by these bots. Now, I'm not saying it can't be picked up at all. Of course it can, because the point of capture forms being distorted is so it's hard for a bot to read, or a computer program, if you like, to read. But just by adding this into an image, which is quite a simple process using GD, just gives that added security. So it's a lot more secure to store text as image if you don't want it to be automatically picked up by a piece of software that might be trailing through websites trying to collect specific information. So the GD library, like I said, is really useful for mainly these three things. You can obviously use it for a variety of purposes. It can take images and change them. We can change colors. We can change anything really. We're not going to go into the complexities of these things because there are loads and loads and loads of functions used within GD. It's a massive, massive library with lots of functions and lots of ways to do this. So I'm just going to give you sort of an introduction. We're going to use these three examples. We're going to change some text like this, so an email address, into an image. We're also going to be looking at watermarking images as we upload them, or just looking at a function to watermark images, so you can combine this with an upload script. And we're also going to look at creating our own capture form. So that's basically the GD library and what it's used for. If you are using it, if you're having trouble using it, so if the functions that you're giving that we're going to look at in other tutorials aren't working, I suggest you go and Google for GD, have a look at downloading it and installing it. But otherwise, I'd highly recommend you use it pre-installed on a package such as XAMPP, like I'm using, and then it'll already be there for you installed, and it'll be available to use. Hello, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a PHP video tutorial for the New Boston. Now in this video we're going to be looking at how we can convert an email address by processing it dynamically in this index.php file, and we want to generate an image version of this text, so convert the text to graphic, so a graphical representation of the text in this generate.php file. And we're going to do this using the PHP GD library. Now, if you don't already have the GD library installed, or you don't think you have it installed, follow along with the tutorial and see if you have any output. If you don't, you can also, or alternatively, you can use PHP info to check whether it's installed. Now, if it's not installed, I do recommend you use a package such as XAMPP anyway. This will already include the GD library in your PHP installation. Otherwise, head over to Google for it, and you'll be able to download it. Okay, so we need to go through a variety of stages in order to complete this. The first thing we need to do is we need to change the header information of the page. What's going to happen is when we visit this generate.php page in our browser is then going to interpret this as an image as a whole. So what we're not going to be able to do is write our code here to produce the image and then say have HTML data outside of this. So let me just talk a bit about why you might need to do this as well. So email addresses stored in plain text format on a web page could be insecure, because you could be looking at bots, robots that will be going through web pages looking for email addresses themselves. Now, this isn't a 100% secure method, obviously, because what we're doing is wherever we are displaying text data, whether it be in plain text or in image format, we're still having the risk of bots being able to read our image data as well and process this graphical image data and convert it back to text. So this is just a way that you can add something to your website that gives a certain level of peace of mind to your users. So the first thing I mentioned that we need to do, remember we're working in this generate.php file and we're going to display the image from index.php. Our users are never going to visit generate.php on its own. We're going to be doing everything from index in the index page. So the first thing we need to do is change the header, and we do this with the PHP header function. So you may have seen things like header location, etc., but what you can do is change the content type from this function. So we can just type in here, content type, and then we can choose a content type. So if you've looked at file types before and you know what's returned from file types, you know that for a JPEG file, which is the format we're going to be creating our image in, is image and then /JPEG. So what this has done now is it's changed the data type of our page. Let's just open our browser. We're already on generate.php. We're going to refresh. Okay, so nothing's come up as of such to let us know that this data type has been successful. But what happens if we come down here and type some text down here? So now let's refresh our page, and you can see that we're not getting the text output up, even though we're just specifying HTML content outside our tags. Now we can successfully say that our content type has been changed, or more or less successfully say that it's been changed. So we've changed the content type of our page, which is extremely important because we are going to be, in the end, using a function called image.jpg, and we're going to be outputting our created JPEG image to the page. So this stage here in the header is very important. So the next thing we need to do is specify the email and also the email length. Now the email length will come into context later when we use this length to determine how wide the image is going to have to be. So for now, let's just specify the email. Now what I'm going to do for now is specify this as just a static variable with static text. We're not going to be using dynamics. Later we're going to be using the get we're going to be using get in the browser to process this. So it will look something like $_get email. But for now, just so it's easy to test as we go through our program, I'm just going to say example@example.com. So now what we need to do is grab the length of this email. So that's basically the string length, and what this is going to do is we're going to see how big our font creates each character to be and multiply the width of our image to be like that. For example, if we had let's just say we had Alex, the text we were outputting was Alex, and the width of each character was, let's say, I don't know, 5 pixels. We'd end up with a 5, 10, 15, 20, so 20 pixel in width image. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, later when we use the function, you'll understand a bit more about that. So let's just put our full email address in here, so example@example.com. And now let's create a new variable called email length, and that is going to equal strlen. So we're using the strlen function and getting the length of the email. So let's just echo that out and test that out. Let's get rid of this header so we can test content onto the page. So 19, that sounds about right, so that's worked. Okay, so what do we need to do next? Well, we need to work out the font size that we're going to be using, and then we're going to need to work out the width and the height of the image. Now the height of the image is absolutely fine. That can be just the individual height of the characters that we're using. So we're going to use a function called image font width and image font height to grab the width and the height. But for the width, we need to multiply it by the length of this email address, like I demonstrated earlier. The height can just remain the same because we don't need to make it any bigger than the actual text itself. So let's choose a font size. So we can create a new variable called font_size, and for now I'm going to choose that to 4. I was playing around with this earlier, and the value 4 seemed like the most sort of web page like font size that I could find without condensing the text size too small to make it look too bold, or making it too big to make it look too thin. You know, I had to play around with it, and I guess you can do too when you've finished your program. So the font size is equal to 4. Now what we need to do is we need to determine the image width and the height before we actually create our canvas that we can start painting on our text and our background colour. In this case the background colour is going to be white, but we still need to specify the colour of the background using RGB numbers, if you like, or integers. So we need to create the image width and the image height. So I'm going to create a variable called image underscore width, and that's going to equal, in fact we'll do height first because that's the easy one. Height equals, and the function we're using is image font height. So we image font height, and we've got camel caps here, remember, so we've got a capital H, F and a capital I. So image font height, and all we do is we simply grab the font size that we're using. So we just say font underscore size. Simple as that. So now what we need to do is determine the width. So the width is going to be structured slightly different to this, but it's going to be more or less the same. We just have one addition to the end of this line. So we've got image font width, and that's again from the font size. So we're taking the width from this font size 4. Now, however, what we need to do is we need to multiply this by the string length in order to create a font width that's exactly going to fit our characters in. So all we need to do is multiply this by email length. Now, like I said, what this is going to do is it's going to multiply this by, in this case, 19, I think, like we said. So we're going to be multiplying however big one character is, or the size that the characters in the font go in, and we're going to be multiplying that by 19. So we're going to have enough room for our text. I'll show you later, maybe change it around. If not, you can obviously play around with this value to see what happens, and you'll cut off your image basically. So now what we need to do is create an instance of our image that we are creating. So we're going to take into account two arguments. This is going to be the image height and the image width. So let's go ahead and create a variable just called image. So this is image create, and we first of all need to specify the width and the height. That's the default ordering for this. So we need to say image width, comma, image underscore height. So we've specified the two variables that we've created here. Now our image is created inside this variable here, and we can start doing things like allocating colors to it. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to allocate a background color. So our background color is going to be white, and our foreground color, if you like, or our text color, because we're going to use a function called image string, which basically outputs a horizontal string along our image rather. And we're going to need to take in a couple of parameters. So the parameters that we're going to need, or one of them, is the color. So the first one, remember I said the function was called image allocate. Or image color allocate, sorry. This I've used without defining a variable, because what we need to do is this will simply just set the background color to our image. We're going to specify the instance of our image in here. So we're going to type in image here, so we know that we're just allocating a general color to this image here. Okay, and that color is going to be 255 for the red, 255 for the green, and 255 for the blue. So we've got an RGB value of 255, 255, 255, which, as some of you may know if you've worked with colors before, that is white. So we've allocated a general color to our image, so we've put a white background in. Now what we need to do is actually create a variable that's we're going to be able to specify the color of our text when we output it. So with the font, as with the font size, I'm going to say font underscore color, and this is going to be equal to image color allocate. So I'm using exactly the same function. I'm applying it to exactly the same image, so we've got image and image. But this time I'm going to set the RGB values to 0, 0, 0. And again, for those of you who have worked with colors or recognize what this could be, this is the color black. So we've got black here with 0, 0, 0. So we've got opposite ends of the scale, 0 being the minimum, 255 being the max. We've got white and black, so that's pretty simple. Obviously I encourage you to play around with different color values, play around with different things like that, and you'll get a lot used to using these functions and how they work. So now what we need to do is just use a standard of a function on its own. We're not going to put it into a variable, and this is called image string, and this in total takes 6 arguments. So we're taking 6 arguments into this image string, or parameters. So I'm just going to type image string. So the title of the function sort of gives it away. We've got image, which is what we're creating essentially, and string. So we're creating an image from a string. So the first thing we're going to do is give reference to the image that we've created, or the canvas that we've created. We've applied our color to our canvas. We've created a variable called font color, which we're using inside our image, and we can specify that color in here. We now need to say what the font size is going to be, so that is font_size. Remember, we set that up there to 4. We're then going to specify the x and the y coordinates where we're placing this text, or this string, inside our image. Now, because we've created it with the height of exactly the font height, and we've created it the width of exactly the font width, we're going to set this to 0, 0, but it's going to be in the top left hand corner. And the reason for this is because if we were set this to any positive amount, or any negative amount in fact, it's going to overlap or underlap, and we're not going to be able to see anything. But again, these are values that you can change and play around with after you finish with the tutorial, so you can feel free to see how they work. Okay, so the next is the email. We need to specify the email address that we're echoing out, which is in fact the string data. So we're going to say email. That's pretty simple. And then last but not least is the font color. So font_color, which we specified here, remember. Notice that nowhere inside here are we setting the background color. That's why I left it without declaring it and putting it inside a variable. So we've done image string. You might think that we're done. We've output a string in image format, but now what we need to do is finalize and create our image, and we do this with the function I mentioned it earlier. It's image JPEG, without the O. So what we're doing is we're outputting our image. So with this image string, we've modified this image, this instance of our image here that we created, image create. Now what we're doing is we're outputting it. Make sure you don't forget your semicolon on the end of the line. And now we are pretty much done. So now what we can do is test it. Hopefully it works, and then if it doesn't work, we can fix it, and if it does, we can look at how we can use it more practically. Because remember, I mentioned earlier that we can't use HTML output either before or after our PHP tags, because what we've done is we've changed the content type of this entire page to an image. So let's go into our browser and click refresh, and we should, yeah, there we go. So now what we've got is a textual representation, or an image representation of our text by using these functions that I've already mentioned. So really, it's quite simple if you remember these functions, remember what they do, and also remember the parameters and in which order they go. It hasn't taken me long to learn this. You do forget after a while, and you have to sort of refer back to things, but it's generally pretty simple, and you get quite a neat output. So this is quite cool. We've got example at example.com. Like I said earlier in the tutorial, I want this to be dynamic. For example, you could keep your generate.php file on your website somewhere and refer back to it every time you wanted to convert, say, a public email address that's going to be displayed to an image. So you want to make this static variable that we've got here more dynamic. So we want to take user input, or input that's going to be processed through our code eventually. So all I'm going to do is modify this and change it to get email. In fact, probably the best thing to do would be to make this a bit more, just a bit more flowing and working properly. I'm going to say if is set $_get email, then set that to email. Otherwise, I want to say echo. Oh no, sorry, I don't want to echo. No. I want to say email equals no email specified.
Okay, so what's going to happen now is we're going to check for this get variable, and if so, we're going to put it into the email variable that's going to be used by our program. So we're now working with more dynamic input. Otherwise, the email is just going to equal no email specified. So let's go on to our generate.php and just hit refresh. No email specified. So now what I can do is I can specify the email here, and I can say email equals example, or say example at phpacademy.org, just so we've got a bit of change going on, and you can see that that email address is now written out. So let's try putting some long value in it. So let's just say example at phpacademy.org again, but we'll copy and paste this over and over again, just so we can see how the length of this image changes. Now let's say we were to just specify a width for ourselves. We could, I'm going to cut this so I can use it again later. Let's say a 20, for example. Now let's go into our generate file, and you can see that it's only just giving us a bit of this image. So we're using this function. We're not creating any code for the sake of it. We're doing this so everything is dynamically updated and we don't lose out on any data. And also this also means this also means that what we're doing is we're not wasting any data. I mean, we could say, well, the image width could be 1,000, pixels long, or 10,000 pixels long, or something. But we're only creating it here the size we actually need it. So we're saving up on processing time, and we're saving up on space as well, or rather memory. So now what we need to do is work out how we're going to put this into a form. Now the problem here is, like I said, up here I could say, yeah, I'm going to write email, and what should happen now is it should say email, it should break down a line, and then it should output this image, when in actual fact, when we refresh the page, we get all of this gobbledygook come up. Cannot modify header information, headers already sent in this page, and then we get the literal sort of textual, representation of the JPEG, as if you were to open it up in a text editor. So this looks a massive mess at the moment, and we also can't put output within our code. So I could say, well, after the header, then we can say email and then a break. But if you refresh, you see that nothing comes up now because you've ruined the content of your page. This content type is image JPEG, it's nothing else, no text, nothing. We're just outputting an image and that's it. So how do we go about doing this? Because the image now exists as a PHP file. If you look in here, we're essentially dealing with what's a dynamic JPEG. We've got generate.php, and we've got an argument after here, or an input variable after here. So how are we going to insert this, what we've got here? Let me just highlight it. No, I can't. So what we're going to do to put this email address inside an actual image on our page, because we can't use this at the moment as it is. Well, that's where index.php comes in, like I mentioned earlier. I'm going to set up a profile page, if you like, with exactly how I do it normally. So, well, I wouldn't do it normally like this, but let's say we've got name, and that equals some dynamic value, so it could be Alex. Then we'll break down a couple more times, and we'll say email. We'll break down. Now what we want to do is we want to output this image from generate.php in here. So how are we going to go about doing that? Well, we're going to create an image like we would in an image like we normally would in HTML, and we'd normally say something like image.jpg here, or email.jpg or something. But what we can actually do that you might not already know is we can insert the contents of a file in here, and because generate.php is being processed as an image type, it will actually pick up inside image source as an image itself. So what we can do is we can say generate.php, and what that's going to do now, obviously we haven't specified an image, so this part of our code is going to take action. So let's go ahead and refresh the page, the index page this time, not the generate.php page. So index.php, you can see that we've got name Alex and an email, no email specified. So now inside image source, we can now start predefining post or using get variables. So I'm now going to say email equals Alex, or example
example.com. And we can refresh, and you can see now we're on our index page, everything's fine, but we now just have a graphical representation of an email address. Now, just a few notes. The whole purpose of this tutorial was being able to create some text as an image in order to maintain some level of security on the website, so this email address cannot be obtained. Now let's go ahead and look at the page source. And you'll see that we've got this image source equals generate.php email equals example@example.com. Now there lies a problem in our method because it's flawed. What we actually have now is a text representation of our email address still existing in our code. Now there's a couple of ways that you can solve this, and I'm not going to do it, but I'm just going to talk about it briefly. If you've dealt with databases and retrieving values from databases, what we could do is we could say email equals, and we could maybe supply a user ID here instead. Now that user ID might correspond to a value in a database in which an email address is stored. In fact, let's go ahead and quickly make an example. We're going to need to connect to our database, but if you've already looked at that, you should be comfortable with this. Okay, so I've opened up PHP My Admin, so we're going to be sort of administering our database. Let's have a look at what we've already got stored. Now, your database could obviously be different. You could be using it for different purposes. Mine is a basic login database, so this information that's stored about users is going to help us log in. Now, that's irrelevant for now. We've got an ID of 6 for Alex and an ID of 7 for Dale. Now, this is a unique incrementing value. So what we could now do is modify our generate.php file to take in a user's ID, and what that's going to do is it's going to return their email address as we have just by typing it in here. So let's just close the source here. So the first thing we need to do is connect to our database, so let's go ahead and just quickly connect to our database. We're going to say MySQL connect. Now this is very rough, so don't follow my example in this sense. There is another tutorial about connecting to a database. So root MySQL select DB. So what we're doing now is we're selecting the database, which I believe is called A_database. So A_database. Now let's perform a query, and this is going to be MySQL query, and we can say select email. So we're selecting the email field, which is here. So select email from so what's our table's called our table's called users. So select email from users, where ID equals, and we want to specify the ID of the user, and that's going to be taken in. Let's copy and paste this up here. So query equals MySQL query select mail. So our ID here is going to be, we'll just call this ID for now. What I'm going to do is add just some security onto this. So I'm going to enclose this in MySQL real escape string to help prevent SQL injection. Okay, so if is set get, and this time we're going to get the value ID, and we're now going to say ID equals $_get ID. So now let me briefly take you through what I've done. I've connected to the database using connected to the server, the MySQL server, using my credentials. Then I've selected my database. Now I'm checking for an ID input. The ID is going to equal the input that we've specified using our get. Otherwise, email is going to say no email specified once again. So down here, what we can do is perform our query, which we've performed. Now we should retrieve some information back. So I'm going to say query result is equal to MySQL result. Now we can specify the query that we executed. And we can also specify the row, which is going to be 0, because we're only going to retrieve one row, and then the field here, so that's going to be email. So the query that we performed here,
the row, which is going to be the 0 row, which is the only row that's been returned, and email there. So what we could do is have checks in here to check if this exists, or if the ID exists. I suppose we could quickly do that now. If MySQL num rows query is greater than or equal to 1, which it will never be greater than 1, we can include this check anyway, this comparison anyway, and get the result. Otherwise, email equals ID not found. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of this query here, this variable here, to email, because the value that we're returning from this MySQL result function is going to be the email address of the user. Therefore, now what's going to happen is our script is going to run as normal. So let's go through this again, just so you make sure you entirely understand. We're connecting to our database, or connecting to our server, selecting our database, checking if this ID value, which we previously had, let's go back to our source, we previously had as email equals, this will now read ID equals, and then we're going to specify a specific ID. Then the ID variable here is equal to what we've specified. Otherwise, email equals no email specified, as we did before. Now what we're doing is we're performing a query. In fact, we're going to perform this query here inside here, because otherwise there's no need to continue, and we'll change this to no ID specified. So sorry if that's confused you. Let's bring this down to make it a bit easier to read. So if we have set this ID thing, then we complete a query. So query is selecting email, so we're selecting one field from the users table where our ID equals the ID that we've specified, so ID up here, ID up there. MySQL real escape string for a bit of security against SQL injection. Now we're checking if the rows returned are greater than or equal to 1. So if they are greater than or equal to 1, which means that we have successfully retrieved an email value, we retrieve this value by using the MySQL result function, our query that we've run up here, 0 row, which is the only row that's been returned, and we're retrieving the email field. Otherwise, email equals ID not found. Then we come down here and we do our checks, as I've already explained in the tutorial. So let's test this out after that long mouthful of explaining. Let's go back to index.php. Let's first of all not specify and see if we return with the correct error. You'll see no ID specified. So now let's go in and say ID equals. Now the ID that we have in the database, the two IDs, we have 6 and 7. So let's specify this to 10 because that doesn't exist. So we should, when we refresh our page, retrieve the result saying that the ID has not been found. So ID not found, so that's fine, it works. Now let's go back and do it sensibly, so we can say 6. Now what this should now do is retrieve the email address of user 6, and that is alex@somedomain.com. So let's go over to our page and refresh, and we retrieve alex@somedomain.com. So not only are we converting this to text, we're securely doing it, because now if we look at our page source, the email address doesn't exist anywhere in this code. Okay, so our bots are going to find it harder to pick up a plain text email value. So let's just try it with 7, which is Dale's email address, and then the tutorial will be over. So let's refresh, and you can see that's changed to dale@somedomain.com. So that's a little bit about why you should use this method as much as possible, and a really quick and easy way to do it. Play around with the code, make it your own, change colours, change font sizes, and I wish you all the best of luck with creating this, because our functions do get a bit tricky.